Meditations on the Tarot, Letter 11, Force. This thing is the strongest of all powers, the force of all forces, for it overcometh every subtle thing, and doth penetrate every solid substance. Tabula Smaragdina 9. Powerful Virgin, Merciful Virgin, Faithful Virgin. Lauretanian Litany. Dear unknown friend, in the preceding letter, the transformation of fallen animality into holy animality was discussed, where the latter is spontaneous obedience to God, without the hindrance of reflection, doubt, or motives of interest. Such obedience is basically an instinct. This is why holy animality is represented in the Hermetic tradition, in the vision of Ezekiel, in the Apocalypse of St. John, and in Christian iconography, by four holy animals, whose synthesis, the Sphinx, is divine instinctivity, or the kingdom of God in and through the unconscious. For God reigns, i.e., he is worshipped, obeyed, and loved, not only through explicit theologies and philosophies, or through explicit prayer, meditation, and cult acts, but also in general through the hunger and thirst for righteousness, for truth and for beauty, and likewise through each act of generosity and every expression of respect, admiration, and adoration. Yes, the world is full of implicit religion, and the inspired saints and poets who say that the birds praise God when they sing are in no way mistaken, because it is their tiny life itself which sings the great life and makes heard, through its countless variations, the same news which is as old as the world and new as the day. Life lives and vibrates in me. What homage to the source of life is expressed by these small streams of life, the birds which sing. Religio naturalis, or natural religion, certainly exists and fills the world. Its waters emanate from the throne of God because, in filling beings great and small with the prodigious hope and faith which underlies vital elan, they cannot flow out from anywhere else other than the immediate presence of God. The cascades of hope and faith which are revealed by the great yes that all living beings say, by the very fact that they are living and that they prefer life to death, these cascades cannot bear in themselves anything else other than certain testimony of the fundamental presence of God, i.e., the meaning and purpose of being alive. The waves of this testimony reach the unconscious nature of beings and take effect there as this prodigious conviction which underlies vital elan. The primal revelation, which is referred to by theology and to which natural religion is due, is the hope and faith which vibrates both in the whole world and in each particular being, generally as a subconscious conviction, that life proceeds from a holy source, that it flows towards an end of supreme worth, and that it is gift, benediction, and vocation. The mystery of natural religion, which is at the same time that of vital elan, is found expressed with remarkable clarity in the Apocalypse of St. John. Before the throne there is, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal, and round the throne, on each side of the throne, are four living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with the face of a man, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle. And the four living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all round and within, and day and night they never cease to sing, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Revelation 4, 6-8. This gives a tableau of the working of natural religion, and its structure and elements. It is the presence which is reflected in the limpid sea like crystal, and it is holy animality which never ceases to sing, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. The sea of glass is the eye of the whole of nature for God. The four creatures, full of eyes all round and within, what they are and what they do, represent the natural reaction to the divine presence. Perception and reaction. Here is the essence of the natural religion which fills the unconscious core of creatures and which manifests itself through vital elan. Because all that lives participates in the collective perception of the sea of glass, and in the collective reaction of the chorus, holy, holy, holy. For this participation is the life of life, and the source from which the elan of vital elan springs forth. The saying, nature is fundamentally supernatural, is therefore profoundly true. For natural and supernatural life always originate from the same source. The source of all life is religion, conscious or unconscious, i.e. perception of the presence and reaction to the presence. Insofar as my heart beats, that I breathe, that my blood circulates, insofar, in other words, that faith and hope work in me, insofar do I take part, thereby, in the great cosmic ritual in which all beings participate, all the hierarchies from the seraphim down to butterflies, namely in natural religion's sacrament of baptism, which is immersion in the waters of the sea of glass, and natural religion's sacrament of confirmation, which takes place day and night through the chorus of choirs of animated nature, holy, holy, holy. All beings are baptized and confirmed in natural religion, because, insofar as they live, they have faith and hope. But the baptism and confirmation with fire and spirit, the sacraments of love, surpass those of natural religion. They bear forgiveness and healing to fallen nature. Fallen nature also has its unconscious mystery, i.e. its collective instinctivity of perception, or its waters, and its collective instinctivity of reaction, or its creatures. Again, it is the Apocalypse of St. John which reveals this. The following is the origin of the sea of fallen nature according to the Apocalypse. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river which the dragon had poured from his mouth. Revelation 12:15-16. The difference between the waters of the sea of glass before the throne and the waters poured forth by the serpent is that the former are the calm, peace, and stability of contemplation, or pure perception. They are as glass, like crystal, whilst the latter are in movement, poured forth, like a river, in the pursuit of an aim, namely that of sweeping away the woman. In the world there are therefore two different kinds of arriving at a conviction. One can be illumined by the serene clarity of contemplation, or one can be swept away by an electrifying flood of passionate arguments, aiming at a desired end. The faith of the illuminated is full of tolerance, patience, and calm steadfastness, like crystal. The faith of those who are swept away is, in contrast, fanatical, agitated, and aggressive. In order to live, it needs conquests without end, because it is conquest alone which keeps it alive. The faith of those who are swept away is greedy for success, this being its reason for existence, its criterion, and its motivating force. Nazis and communists are of this faith, i.e. of those who are swept away. True Christians and true humanists can only belong to the other faith, i.e. that of the illuminated. In the world there are therefore two kinds of faith, two kinds of instinctivity, two different ways of seeing the world, two different ways of looking at it. There is the open and innocent look, which desires only to reflect the light, i.e. which wants only to see, and there is the scrutinizing look, which seeks to find and lay hold of its desired prey. There are spirits whose thought and imagination are put to the service, without reserve, of that which is true, beautiful, and good. And there are spirits whose will, infatuated with an aim, make use of thought and imagination so as to win others to their cause, so as to sweep them away by the river of their will. A Plato has never had success as a revolutionary, and will never do so. But Plato himself will always live throughout the centuries of human history. He has lived there for 23 centuries, and will be in each century the companion of the young and old who love pure thought, seeking only the light which it comprises. Karl Marx, in contrast, has had 1 century of astonishing success and has revolutionized the world. He has swept away millions, those who went to the barricades and trenches in civil wars, and those who went to the prisons either as jailers or as prisoners. But you, as a solitary human soul, a soul of depth and sobriety, what do you owe to Karl Marx? You know quite well that despite the intellectual fracas and the blood and dust provoked by Marx, when once appeased it will be Plato and you to whom the young will turn, and also the old, who will love the light of thought in centuries to come. For Plato illumines, whilst Marx sweeps away. Can you imagine a Christian Hermeticist in Moscow's Red Square on the 1st of May, or on the anniversary day of the October Revolution, the Great Socialist Revolution? But let us return to our tarot arcana, seeing that we are still neither swept away by any kind of mass movement, nor forced to march in columns and shout with the crowd. Now, the waters which pour out of the mouth of the serpent sweep away, whilst those of the sea of glass, like crystal before the throne, illumine. And just as the collective perception of virgin nature, or the sea of glass before the throne, is accompanied by the collective reaction to this perception, or perpetual adoration, by the 4 holy creatures, so also there is in fallen nature a reaction to the waters of the serpent swallowed up by the earth, namely the beasts of the apocalypse. The apocalypse does not designate them by the term living creature, or tozun, which it uses to designate the 4 before the throne, but rather by the term beast, totherion, or in Latin bestia. Thus it opposes animality and bestiality. Genuine animality is holy, bestiality is degenerate. Besides the red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, Revelation 12:3, which is the primordial serpent, the Apocalypse speaks of the beast with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems upon its horns and a blasphemous name upon its heads, Revelation 13:1. St. John saw this beast rising out of the sea. It was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth, Revelation 13:2. St. John goes on to describe another beast which rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon, Revelation 13:11. The Apocalypse speaks also of a scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns, upon which the woman Babylon is seated, Revelation 17:3. Finally, it speaks of the false prophet who, in the presence of the 2-horned beast, worked signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image, Revelation 19:20. There are therefore 4 beasts, including the false prophet, who is a human beast, which correspond to the 4 Hyoth, the holy living creatures before the throne. Since it is a matter here in the 2 tableaus above of the mystery of force or Shakti in the Tantric tradition, namely that which moves non-fallen nature and that which moves fallen nature, and since the notion force comes down to the principle of reaction, which implies the perception preceding it, the 2 tableaus are summarized in 2 feminine figures. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth in anguish for delivery. Revelation 12:1-2. And a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, arrayed in purple and scarlet, and bedecked with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. Revelation 17:3-4. The former is the soul of cosmic, non-fallen nature, sun, moon, stars, and the latter is the soul of terrestrial fallen nature, gold, jewels, pearls, and beast. The first is a mother, the second is a prostitute. The one is perception of that which is above, and reaction to that which is thus perceived, through its realization, or childbirth. The other is horizontal perception, or fornication, and reaction to that which is thus perceived, through sterile enjoyment, the cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. The one is the Virgin Mother, and the other is the great prostitute of Babylon. The Virgin Mother, the soul of natural virgin nature, i.e. non-fallen nature, which is in the anguish of perpetual childbirth, until the birth which is the ideal of all births is accomplished. Evolution, orthogenesis, natural selection, mutations in the hereditary mechanism, avatars, Advent, Christmas. So many problems and ideas referring to the one great expectation and the one great hope for evolution to attain its ultimate level of flowering and to give its flower, for orthogenesis to produce the being of the culmination of evolution, for natural selection to result in the future superhuman, for the mechanism of heredity to bring its optimum to the light of day, for what we worship above to manifest amongst us below, for the Messiah to come, for God to become man. Evolution, progress, genealogies, prophecies, hopes throughout the centuries, what do they signify at root, if not the anguish of childbirth across the ages, and the constant expectation of the birth in question? What other ideal could be present, radiating into the depths of all motherhood? What other aim could animate free nature, or natura naturans, throughout the millennia of her activity of generation? This is therefore what is conveyed by the good news. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. John 1:14. Free nature, natural religion, the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars, the Virgin Sofia, was present in Mary, and it is thus that the soul of non-fallen nature gave birth to the divine Word. Free nature has therefore accomplished her task. She has surpassed herself, and since then the epoch of the supernatural, the epoch of divine magic, has begun. Natural religion is now flooded in the radiance or glory of supernatural religion, and non-fallen nature has become a dispensator and cooperator in the miracles of the new evolution, the evolution of the second birth. Nevertheless, the Virgin is the principle of force, i.e. the principle cooperating in the realization of supernatural acts of the Holy Spirit. This means to say that divine magic not only does not act against non-fallen nature, but also that the latter cooperates with it. The sun, moon, and stars therefore lend their assistance to acts of divine magic aspiring to the resurrection. If this were not so, if virgin nature did not participate in acts of divine magic or miracles, then these latter would always be new creations ex nihilo, and not transformations, transmutations, and healings. Yet the wine at the wedding of Cana was not created from nothing, but rather it was water which was changed into wine. Let us also note the fact that the Virgin Mother was not only present at the wedding, but also that she took part in an explicit manner in the miracle of changing the water into wine, since it was thanks to her initiative that the miracle took place. The multiplying of bread in the desert was a miracle of the multiplying of loaves, and not of the creation of bread from nothing. Here also the cooperation of nature is evident. And the man born blind had to wash in the pool of Siloam in order to be healed by the words of the Master, and by the clay made with the Master's saliva that was applied to his eyes. Here the participation of nature is apparent. Even the miracle of miracles, the resurrection itself, was not the creation of a new body, but rather the transformation of the crucified body. The latter had to disappear from the tomb in order that the resurrected one could appear to Mary Magdalene and the others. And the resurrected one himself indicated the continuity of his body by inviting Thomas to put his finger in the marks of the nails and his hand in the wound on his side. Virgin nature therefore has her part in all the miracles, and it is virgin nature participating actively in the miracles of divine magic which is the subject of the 11th arcanum of the tarot, force, representing a woman victorious over a lion, holding its jaws open with her hands. The woman does so with the same apparent ease, without effort, with which the magician of the first arcanum handles his objects. Moreover, she wears a hat similar to that of the magician, in the form of a lemniscate. One could say that the two stand equally under the sign of rhythm, the respiration of eternity, the sign for infinity, and that the two manifest two aspects of a single principle, namely that effort signifies the presence of an obstacle, whilst natural integrity on the one hand, and undivided attention on the other hand, exclude inner conflict, and therefore every obstacle, and therefore all effort. Just as perfect concentration takes place effortlessly, so does true force act without effort. Now, the magician is the arcanum of the wholeness of consciousness, or concentration without effort. Force is the arcanum of the natural integrity of being, or power without effort. Because force subdues the lion, not by force similar to that of the lion, but rather by force of a higher order and on a higher plane. This is the arcanum of force. What, therefore, does the 11th arcanum of the tarot teach? Through the very tableau that it represents, it says, "The Virgin tames the lion and thereby invites us to leave the plane of quantity, for the Virgin is evidently weaker than the lion concerning the quantity of physical force, and to raise ourselves to the plane of quality, for it is evidently there that the superiority of the Virgin over the lion is to be found." What is it, therefore, that the lion obeys? What is it that he spontaneously yields to? Is he hypnotized? He is not, because the Virgin does not even look at him. Her gaze is turned elsewhere, far from the lion whose jaws she opens. The lion is subjected to no constraint, either physical or hypnotic. Therefore he obeys nothing beyond his own nature, and therefore it is his true nature which acts in him. It is the lion before which the lion yields. It is holy animality which bestial animality obeys. Now, the force which the card invokes is that of natural religion, that of non-fallen nature. It is the magic of virgin nature which awakens the virgin nature in the lion, and it is this force that the 11th arcanum is called to reveal. There are two principles which one has to understand and distinguish when one wants to go deeply into the arcanum of force. The one is the principle of the serpent, and the other is that of the Virgin. The former is opposition, from which there proceeds friction, which produces energy. The other is concordance, from which comes fusion, which engenders force. Thus, enormous energies of a psychic nature are released into the world through a war, due to a conflict of interests and pretensions, and energies of an intellectual nature pass from a virtual state to one of actuality, when there is a controversy. It is said, "Truth springs forth from the clash of opinions," but actually it is not the truth which springs forth, but rather combative intellectual energy, for truth is revealed through the fusion of opinions and not through a clash. A clash certainly produces intellectual energy, but hardly ever discloses the truth. Quarrelling will never lead to the truth, as long as one does not give it up and seek for peace. Certainly minds can be electrified by polemic, which can cause a veritable intellectual storm in the world, but polemic cannot make the clouds disappear, nor is it given to making the sun shine. I must confess, dear unknown friend, that during my long quest for truth, I have been truly enriched by the fruits of the constructive work of many scientists, and by the spiritual endeavour of many mystics and esotericists, and also by the moral example of many human beings of goodwill. But I owe nothing to polemics or polemicists. I owe nothing to early Christian authors who attack paganism, nor to pagan authors who attack Christianity. I owe nothing to the learned Protestant doctors of the 16th century, and the academics of the Enlightenment and the Revolution of the 18th century have not taught me anything. Also, I owe nothing to the militant savants of the 19th century, and the revolutionary spirits of our century, such as Lenin, have not given me anything. What I want to say is that the polemicists enumerated above have given me a lot in the way of objects of knowledge, and it is thanks to them that I have understood the intrinsic sterility of the spirit of opposition as such. but they have given me nothing in the way of sources of knowledge. In other words, I have learnt much through them, but I have learnt nothing from them. I owe them what they do not want to be owed, and I owe them nothing of what they want one to owe them. Now, it is through the fusion of opinions that truth lights up. Conversation, the process of together versing or flowing together, is the very opposite of controversy, the process of controversing or flowing against. Conversation is the operation of the fusion of opinions. It is a work of synthesis. True conversation always has in principle the underlying statement from the Gospel, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them." Matthew 18:20. For all true conversation calls upon the transcendent centre, who is the way, the truth, and the life. The Zohar is a historical document which, amongst other things, supplies perhaps the best example of the creative role that conversation can play. There the rabbis, Eleazar, Simeon, Jose, Abba, and others, joined their efforts and experiences with the aim of arriving together at a deeper, loftier, and greater comprehension of the Torah. And these rabbis weep and embrace one another when this happens. From page to page, the reader of the Zohar, this remarkable document of spirituality experienced in common, aspired to in common, and appreciated in common, learns to understand, appreciate, and love more and more the conversation which aims at the fusion and synthesis of opinions. Now, the force which is at work here is that of the Virgin, which the doctors of the Zohar called Shekinah, whilst the energy which electrifies polemicists is that of the serpent. The force of life and electrical energy, are these not the most clear manifestations of these two principles? Life and electricity must be clearly distinguished. Thus, today there is a tendency to confuse them and to reduce them to electricity alone. However, electricity is due to the antagonism of opposites, whilst life is the fusion of polarities. Empedocles, from 490 to 430 BC, certainly saw this difference, and taught that the motion of the 4 elements, earth, water, air, and fire, is due to 2 opposite causes, friendship or love, and strife or enmity. The Apocalypse of St. John speaks of the war between the celestial armies of the archistrategist Michael and the red dragon with his hordes on the one hand, and the wedding of the Lamb and his bride, or Hieros Gamos, on the other hand. The dragon, or serpent of old, opposes himself to the higher spheres. Here is the origin of terrestrial electricity. The hierarchies, represented by the archistrategist Michael, have to resist the dragon. Here it is the origin of celestial electricity. It is celestial electricity which was the means of the miracle of divine anger in the Old Testament, the flash of fire that came out of the tabernacle and consumed Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, in Leviticus 10:1-2. The fire of the Lord which burned in the camp at Taberah and consumed some outlying parts of the camp, Numbers 11:1-3. The earth which opened its mouth and swallowed up Korah and all his men, Numbers 17:32. Uzzah struck down on the spot, having taken hold of the ark, because the oxen stumbled and made it tilt, 2 Samuel 6:6-7. The fire from above which consumed Elijah's burnt offering before the prophets of Baal, 1 Kings 18:38. The fire which descended twice and both times consumed 50 soldiers and their captains near the hill at the top of which Elijah was sitting, 2 Kings 1:10-12. The miracles of Elisha, 2 Kings, etc. And it is terrestrial electricity of which we make use, not only in the technical field of our civilization, but also in hypnosis, in demagogic propaganda, in movements of revolutionary masses. For electrical energy has its analogous form on various planes, physical, psychic, and even mental. With respect to life, it is like the water of the sea of glass, like crystal, coming from the throne. It is force, natural religion, the soul of non-fallen nature, the Virgin. Virginity is obedience to the divine, and it is therefore in harmony and cooperation with the divine. The Virgin is therefore the soul of life, i.e. force, which exercises no restraint but moves all. And the lion of the 11th card is obedient to the force of its own life, to the profound impulse at the very depths of its own being when it obeys the Virgin who opens its mouth. Scripture has two different terms in Greek for life, zoe and bios. The first signifies vivifying life, and the second derived life. Zoe is to bios as free nature, or natura naturans, is to necessitated nature, or natura naturata. This is also the philosophy of John Scotus Erigena. Zoe is therefore the source, and bios is that which flows, having come from the source. It is bios which flows from generation to generation, and it is zoe which fills the individual in prayer and meditation, in acts of sacrifice and participation in the sacred sacraments. Zoe is vivification from above in a vertical sense. Bios is vitality which, although it once issued from the same source above, passes in the horizontal from generation to generation. Now bios, biological life, flows in the domain of the serpent. For this reason it is mingled with electrical energy in an inextricable way. Biological processes cause electrical currents, and the latter influence the former in living organisms. But it is not bios which drains the resources of the organism. Rather, it is electricity. For electricity is generated through chemical decomposition, and by the opposition of contrary forces, i.e. by internal friction in the organism. This is what causes fatigue, exhaustion, senility, and death. Bios, as such, is never tired or exhausted, and never grows old or dies. The heart and respiration do not need any rest, whereas the remainder of the organism, above all the brain, is plunged into a state of rest each night through sleep, having been drained through the preceding day. Then it is bios which, during sleep, repairs the damage done to the organism by electricity. Sleep is the time when electrical activity is reduced to a minimum and when bios prevails. A tree where bios always prevails, which sleeps continually, so to speak, is in principle immortal. For it is not the exhaustion of its interior vitality, but rather mechanical destruction from outside which puts an end to its life. A tree does not die of old age, it is always killed, uprooted by a storm, struck by lightning, dragged down by the force of gravity, or cut down by man. The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the fruit of the polarity of opposites, is therefore electricity, and electricity entails fatigue, exhaustion, death. Death is the price that is paid for the knowledge of good and evil, i.e. the price of life amidst opposites. For it is electricity, physical, psychic, and mental, which was introduced into the being of Adam Eve, and thereby into the whole of life-endowed nature, from the moment that Adam Eve entered into communion with the tree of opposites, that is to say, with the principle of electricity. And it is thus that death entered into the domain of life-endowed nature. Nevertheless, life-endowed nature is not a uniform and integral entity. It is divided. There is above all division according to the preponderant roles played by bios, electricity, and zoe. The soul of life-endowed nature in which bios is subordinated to electricity is the woman Babylon of the Apocalypse. Life-endowed nature in which bios and electricity are in equilibrium is the suffering creation of which St. Paul said that it sighs for deliverance. Romans 8:19-23. And lastly, life-endowed nature in which bios dominates electricity, and therefore is itself dominated by zoe, is non-fallen nature. Its soul is the celestial virgin, the high priestess of natural religion. This is what constitutes the arcanum of the 11th card of the tarot. One could formulate it as follows. Force is virginity. But what is virginity? The state of virginity is that of the consonance of three principles, the spirit, the soul, and the body. A being in whom spirit, soul, and body are in consonance is in a state of virginity. In other words, it is the principle of the unity of three worlds, heaven, purgatory, and earth. From the point of view of the earth, it is complete obedience of the body to the soul. From the point of view of purgatory, it is complete obedience of the soul to the breath of eternity, or chastity. From the point of view of heaven, it is absolute receptivity to the divine, or poverty. Virginity is therefore the unity of that which is above and that which is below, and it is this which is force, i.e. the action of all three worlds in harmony. Because force, the strongest of all powers, the force of all forces, Tabulus Magdalena 9, is the unity of three worlds in action, that is to say, in action where the divine spirit, the heart, and the body are united. It is the Virgin speaking through Solomon when he writes, "Before his works of old I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning or ever the earth was. When there were no depths I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth, before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens I was there, when he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was at work beside him." Proverbs 8:22-30. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was at work beside him, is a clear statement of the role of the Virgin, who cooperates with the divine not only in the miracles of redemption, but also in those of creation. Co-creatrix, co-redemptrix, co-sanctificatrix, Virgo, Mater, Regina. This formula summarizes the thoughts relating to the principle of virginity. Here is the place to point out that principles do not exist separately from the beings who incarnate and manifest them. Principles as such are always immanent. This is why the reality of the principle of the divine is God. The reality of the principle of the divine word is Jesus Christ, and the reality of the principle of fertile and productive virginity is Mary Sophia. Mary Sophia represents, i.e. incarnates and manifests, the principle of virginity, that of non-fallen nature, that of natural religion, and that of force. She is the central individuality, the queen of the whole domain in question. She is the conscious individual soul who is the concrete ideal, the queen, of virginity, motherhood, and creative, productive, or queenly wisdom. Queenly being the regnal from Regina, or queen. There is not a shadow of doubt for anyone who takes the spiritual life of mankind seriously, even if he is short of authentic spiritual experience, that the Blessed Virgin is not an ideal only, nor a mental image only, nor an archetype of the unconscious, of depth psychology, nor, lastly, an occultistic egregore, a collective astral creation of believers, but rather a concrete and living individuality, like you or I, who loves, suffers, and rejoices. It is not only the children of Fatima, the child Bernadette at Lourdes, the children of La Salette, Falevaux, and the children of Biarritz in Belgium, who have witnessed the Lady, but also innumerable adults across the centuries, including our own. Numerous meetings still remain intimate and undivulged. I know of 3 series of such meetings, including one in Tokyo, Japan. But one series of meetings with the Blessed Virgin took place recently in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, where the Blessed Virgin manifested herself as the Lady of all nations, and inaugurated a prayer movement with a special prayer, with a view to saving all nations from degeneration, disaster, and war. I may add that I went to Amsterdam in order to make as scrupulous an investigation as possible, and the result of this investigation there, confirmed subsequently by experiences of a personal nature, was complete certainty not only with respect to the authenticity of the experiences of the seer, a woman 40 years of age, but also with respect to the authenticity of the subject of these experiences. In writing of these things, I can only agree with the sentiment expressed by Rabbi Simeon in the Zohar, who exclaimed, "Woe to me if I tell, and woe to me if I do not tell. If I tell, then the wicked will know how to worship their master, and if I do not tell, then the companions will be left in ignorance of this discovery." Zohar 11b, page 48. Be that as it may, meetings with the Blessed Virgin are so numerous and so well attested that one must certainly at least admit their objective reality. I say at least because this does not satisfy the demands of my conscience. In fact, I would not be entirely honest or frank with you, dear unknown friend, if I were not to say what is an absolutely sure result in the inner forum of my consciousness of more than 40 years of endeavour and experience. It is the following. One meets the Blessed Virgin inevitably when one attains a certain intensity of spiritual aspiration, when this aspiration is authentic and pure. The very fact of having attained a spiritual sphere which comprises a certain degree of intensity and purity of intention puts you in the presence of the Blessed Virgin. This meeting belongs to a certain sphere, i.e. to a certain degree of intensity and purity of spiritual aspiration, of spiritual experience, just as the experience of having a mother belongs naturally to human family life on earth. It is therefore as natural for the spiritual domain as the fact of having a mother is natural to the domain of one's terrestrial family. The difference is that on earth one can certainly be motherless, whilst in the realm of the spiritual this can never happen. Therefore, the thesis that I am advancing with 100% conviction is that every Hermeticist who truly seeks authentic spiritual reality will sooner or later meet the Blessed Virgin. This meeting signifies, apart from the illumination and consolation that it comprises, protection against a very serious spiritual danger. For he who advances in the sense of depth and height, in the domain of the invisible, one day arrives at the sphere known by esotericists as the sphere of mirages, or the zone of illusion. This zone surrounds the earth as a belt of illusory mirages. It is this zone which the prophets and the apocalypse designate Babylon. The soul and the queen of this zone is in fact Babylon, the great prostitute, who is the adversary of the Virgin. Now, one cannot pass by this zone without being enveloped by perfect purity. One cannot traverse it without the protection of the mantle of the Blessed Virgin, the mantle which was an object of worship and of a special cult in Russia, the mantle of the very Holy Mother of God. It is therefore the protection of this mantle which is absolutely necessary in order to be able to traverse the sphere of mirages without falling prey to the influence of its illusions. The way of Hermeticism, solitary and intimate as it is, comprises authentic experiences from which it follows that the Roman Catholic Church is in fact a depository of Christian spiritual truth, and the more one advances on the way of free research for this truth, the more one approaches the Church. Sooner or later one inevitably experiences that spiritual reality corresponds with an astonishing exactitude to what the Church teaches. That there are guardian angels, that there are saints who participate actively in our lives, that the Blessed Virgin is real, and that she is almost precisely such as she is understood, worshipped, and even portrayed by the Church. That the sacraments are effective, and that there are 7 of them, and not 2 or 3 or even 8, that the 3 sacred vows of obedience, chastity, and poverty constitute in fact the very essence of all authentic spirituality, that prayer is a powerful means of charity, for beyond as well as here below, that the ecclesiastical hierarchy reflects the celestial hierarchical order, that the Holy See and the papacy represent a mystery of divine magic, that hell, purgatory, and heaven are realities, that lastly, the Master himself, although he loves everyone, Christians of all confession, as well as all non-Christians, abides with his Church, since he is always present there, since he visits the faithful there and instructs his disciples there. The Master is always findable and meetable there. Let us return to the arcanum of force, which we will continue in the second part of this recording.